Hello and welcome to everyone, and welcome to the Divorce and Child Custody Discussion podcast here on my YouTube channel. I'm Brian A. Victor. I'm a family law attorney, mediator, and law professor. And in this podcast, we talk about the real issues that affect real people going through divorce and custody disputes. Today's episode is about something that surprises almost everyone I work with. Most people think their custody case begins when they file paperwork. It doesn't. Your custody case begins the moment the relationship starts to break down. Not when you hire an attorney, not when you file a petition, and not when you walk into court. It begins much earlier than that. And what you do and what you say during that early period can shape the entire outcome of your case. Today I'm going to explain why that is and what judges actually look at. However, before we get started, I really want to take a moment to thank you, my loyal viewers, as I do every podcast episode. You, the viewer, well, you're the reason I produce this podcast, so thank you so much for your continued support. And remember to click subscribe so that you don't miss any upcoming or past podcast episodes. As always, thank you to Feedspot. They named this podcast one of the top 15 divorce podcasts to listen to. And a huge thank you to Million Podcasts. They named this podcast one of the top 40 mediation podcasts and listed it at number 1 of their top 30 best child custody podcasts. So thank you. And remember, as always, the goal of this podcast is to educate, and nothing in this podcast constitutes legal advice or creates an attorney-client relationship. So we're going to talk a little bit about judges and their intentions. So one of the most important things to understand is that judges make custody decisions based heavily on patterns. They're not just looking at who you are as a parent. They're looking at what you have been doing as a parent. Who takes a child to school? Who schedules doctor's appointments? Who helps with homework? Who attends activities? Who provides stability? Because custody decisions are not about promises. They are about demonstrated behavior. You can walk into court and say, I want 50-50 custody. But if historically you have only been seeing your child every other weekend, the judge is going to ask a very important, simple question. Why would I change what has been working for this child? You see, judges prioritize stability, and stability is everything. So let's talk now about the biggest mistake I see parents make early on. And here it is. Parents voluntarily reduce their time with their children during separation. Sometimes they do this to avoid conflict. Sometimes they do this because emotions get high. Sometimes they think, this is temporary. But temporary arrangements often become permanent realities because once a pattern is established, it becomes the status quo, and courts are very reluctant to disturb the status quo unless there's a compelling reason to do so. I have seen situations where parents informally agree to see their child occasionally during separation because they think, I'll ask for custody later. But by the time they get to court, it's too late because the plan they have been following has become the status quo. And the court just maintains it at that point. Not because the parent was unfit, but because a pattern had already been established. Another critical reality is that communications between parents often become evidence. Text messages, emails, voicemails, social media posts, all of it. And here's the key point. Judges are not just evaluating facts. They're evaluating judgment. If one parent is calm, respectful, and child-focused in communications, while the other parent is hostile, reactive, or impulsive, well, that matters. It matters a lot. Because custody decisions are largely based on one core question. Which parent is more likely to foster a healthy, stable environment for their child? And this includes emotional stability, communication style, and the ability to co-parent effectively, even when emotions are high, especially when emotions are high. So The court is always looking at the child's best interest. Everything comes back to the one legal standard, the best interest of your child. Not what feels fair to the parents, not what one parent deserves, not who is right or wrong in the relationship. The focus is entirely on the child. Judges look at questions like who provides stability, who supports the child's emotional needs, who encourages a positive relationship with the other parent, who acts in a mature, responsible way. You see, these factors carry tremendous weight, and they are evaluated based on behavior over time, not just behavior in the courtroom. So what should you start doing today? Well, if you're in the early stages of separation, here are some critical principles. Be present in your child's life. Be consistent. Be calm in your communications. Avoid reactive or emotional messages. Think long term, because every decision you make now can affect your case later. Because custody cases are not won by dramatic moments, they're shaped by consistent, steady behavior over time. And the most important takeaway from this episode is this: your custody case doesn't begin in court. It begins in your daily actions. Long before any judge is involved, if you focus on stability, consistency, and your child's well-being, you are not only helping your child, but you're also putting yourself in the strongest possible position moving forward. Well, thank you for joining me on Divorce and Child Custody Discussion. And remember, if you have any topics you'd like to hear about in any upcoming episodes, or if you're looking for FCS prep, feel free to reach out to me at my website at www.brianvictorlaw.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, my YouTube channel, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. So until next time, remember, stay focused and make decisions your future self and your child will thank you for.